Good evening. I'd like to call to order this Monday, August 15, 2022, regular meeting of Canal Winchester Board of Education. Mr. Roberts, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Barnes, Mr. Butler,
Here.
Mr. George,
Here.
Mr. Kruger,
Present.
Ms. Talley.
Here.
Okay. Would everyone stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, moving on to additions and deletions. Are there any additions or deletions this evening?
There is. We have one addition. We would like to add a committee to appoint, to appoint the board committee assignment under organizational.
Okay, thank you very much, Mrs. Hunt.
B1, it's on the live version.
Okay. Okay, and then after that, I'm going to need an approval of the agenda this evening. Motion?
So move.
Second.
Motion, and Mrs. Talley, and Mr. Roberts?
Mr. Kruger,
Yes.
Ms. Talley,
Yes.
Mr. Butler,
Yes.
Mr. George,
Yes.
Okay, motion passes 4-0. And we are going to move on to B, which is organizational. So it's going to be appoint a board committee assignments, and it's going to be for organizational. So it's going to be a motion to appoint board members to serve in the following capacities for 2022. So I know we talked about standing up a committee, so this is going to be our capital committee we're standing up. So as we move forward, we've been talking about different building plans. So this is just something the board wants to do to start another committee to start having conversations. And again, planning out our capital committee as far as planning, as far as facilities and things of that nature. So I'm gonna need a motion on that, a motion to appoint board members to serve in the following capacities for 2022. And then this is gonna be for our capital projects. So I'm gonna need two board members. So I don't know if anybody wants to jump out and volunteer. I know there was a couple people that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
let's get a motion in a second, and then you guys can go
Okay,
from there.
so I'm gonna go ahead and put Mr. George down there. And then our second person, I believe was,
No, you mean, you want a motion first?
you need a motion on.
I'll second Dave George's
Yep.
motion.
Thank you. Okay,
Now you get to discuss.
all right. So again, what we were talking about doing is we're standing up a capital projects committee because we know that as the district continues to grow, we're gonna need to obviously be flexible in our facilities. So that means if we need classroom space, looking at our facilities just as a whole as we continue to grow as a district. So this committee is obviously gonna move us closer to that, and obviously it's something we're gonna be bringing in as an assignment as a committee so we can be proactive as far as planning for future projects. So that is the reason why we are choosing to move in this direction. So I have David George down here. So do we need to vote on the first one and then appoint the second one, or?
No, you made a motion in a second. You guys can
Okay.
decide who you want to appoint.
I believe Vanjie had
Yes.
interest in being on that capital.
Yeah, she did.
That's what I
Yes.
thought.
And then Mrs. Barnes, she had expressed the same interest in me.
Oh, not Mrs. Barnes.
Yep.
I-
Yep, Mrs. Barnes was the one who expressed interest. So I would imagine she's still interested in it, so I'm gonna go ahead and put her down as our second board member. So I have Mr. David George and I have Mrs. Vangela Barnes as our second board member. So I have a motion and I have a second on it. So, does anyone have any other questions on this capital projects committee?
Who would the other members of the committee be? Or is that something that we're gonna discuss now? Or that's gonna be part of what the committee will discuss themselves?
Yes.
How will you go
I
about?
mean, I think that probably Vanjie and I, over the course of the next month, probably will get input from the school administrators, including individual school administration, and just kind of go from there, build a committee so that we're inclusive of all of the interested parties in the district,
Including parents?
including parents.
Great.
Yep.
Okay.
Wonderful. Okay. Does anyone have any other additional questions about the capital projects committee? Okay, so no questions. Mr. Roberts?
Mr. George,
Yes.
Mr. Kruger,
Yes.
Mr. Butler,
Yes.
Ms. Talley.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0. And we're going to move on to our public comments. So public voice this evening. It looks like we do have one public voice, and I have Mr. Cornelius McGrady. So, Mr. McGrady, if you'd come up, and we typically keep our comments to 3 minutes, so whenever you're ready, Mr. McGrady, the floor is yours.
Board, attended. My name is Cornelius McGrady, founder of the Reynoldsburg Youth Human Trafficking Coalition. The coalition is comprised of students from all 4 academies. I submitted a overview of the program that I want to introduce to the school district here. Established in 2009, we began operating on the school district's tax ID and that was in 2014. In 2019, we established our own tax ID. During that time, the coalition was instrumental in training and raising awareness over 6,000 constituents, elected officials, school teachers, residents throughout the district. As a result of the awareness efforts that the coalition made in 2015 or 2016, 2015, they were awarded the Ohio Liberators Award and recognized as the first youth group in Central Ohio to receive that special award. In addition to that, the coalition has received recognition from congressional leaders, state representatives. At the time, DeWine was Attorney General, Portman, state legislators, and the school district. During the, I touched on that. I also gave you an excerpt of the guide that I want to speak to later in more detail, another session about what I. Let me say this: it's not a CRT entity. I was talking to someone the other day, and they said, "Mac, they're not going to let you have that because that's CRT." It's not CRT. Let me give you this brief history. I've been doing the human trafficking initiative since 2008, when I returned back from Iraq. And prior to that, 9 years, 34 years in the military, the last 9 to 10 years, I was equal opportunity practitioner. So during this process, the recent process, during COVID-19, 2021, I'm saying there has to be a link. There's 2 links I was looking for. The link between domestic violence and human trafficking. I found that. So the other one I was looking for was the link between EEOC, Equal Opportunity Employment, and human trafficking. So I finally found that, the position statement by EEOC, showing how they're going to make a more coordinated effort to include EEOC in the fight against human trafficking. What that means is, like I was telling folks, they're looking at it from a social standpoint that they need to take a more progressive stance to bring awareness to the survivors that they are not, they still have a chance to make a commitment to the community, other than be looked at as what are you going to offer my job? You've been on your back for 15, 20 plus years. So that's that stigma type. So I incorporated the EO concept in the human trafficking concept and have come up with the human trafficking diversity group. Established that, they're working on the 501c3 on that as well. So that is a social aspect that I'm looking to bring here under the job readiness program. And another day I can go into more detail.
Okay.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
McGrady.
Thank you, Mr. McGrady.
All right, I don't see anyone else on public voice, so we are going to move on this evening to executive report. So first up this evening is our is our treasurer's report.
I got a quick question. What are we thinking moving forward in conversations? Did I see an email that you were going to have that conversation, or we as a board at the next meeting? How's that going to progress? Because I'm very interested in
Absolutely.
this.
So I have a meeting already scheduled
Okay.
with the high school group. that would oversee the seals later this week. So I would share the email with them with the information, and then I will reach back out to have the conversation. So I stopped by and saw them on the way.
Okay.
Yep, for sure.
Thank you for being here.
Okay, thank you very much. And we're gonna, like I said,
Sorry.
we're gonna move on to our treasurer's report. No problem, Mr. Kruger. All right, Mr. Roberts, I'm sorry. The floor is yours, sir.
Good evening. I will be brief tonight. July is kind of tough. It's the first month in the new fiscal year. One thing I do want to highlight is we did receive our first quarter income tax. It's up almost 26%. I looked last year, and at this point it was up 44%, so it was a big number last year too, mainly because this picks up the April filing period. But the good thing is, it shows you that our district continues to grow, as a lot of those increases are not due to return. So when we get our income tax settlement, we can see, is it associated with a tax filing? Is it due to a withholding? Is it due to delinquencies? And a lot of ours is due to withholdings. So it tells you that it's a sustainable population of income tax. I think it's going to continue to grow. We've talked about that. I think Canal will see an impact at some point from Intel. What kind of impact that will be, we will see. But even without Intel, this district continues to grow. I mean, we in 2009 sustained a depression with minimal decrease or no increase on income taxes. And then we've sustained the pandemic. I mean, we were increased all throughout the pandemic year. So it tells us that the district continues to grow. We haven't seen the student population, but I think eventually we will. We will see that catch up at some point. I don't think we can keep relying on and getting lucky that our student population stays minimal to nothing when the number of houses increases every year. The number of income tax returns increase every single year substantially, and the real estate value continues to increase. So the people are here, and I think eventually so will the students. And I think part of tonight in the building plans, we're going to try to address some of those things. So I found this number to be more interesting than anything, because we know that it was going to be up. We projected for it to be up. Last year I looked over the final 3 quarters. I think we were up 575,000 in the first quarter, and then the remaining 3 quarters we were up about 150,000. So it gets where it's about 50,000 per quarter that it becomes up. So this is definitely our biggest quarter. So we're not going to see increases year over year of 527,000 every single income tax collection. That'd be nice, but I don't think we're going to see that. It's hard to really kind of forecast the expenditures right now. We're still operating on old salaries. New salaries will take place in August, second payment, and then September the teachers will pick up their new contract amounts. So these will start increasing in August and September. So next month and the month after, we'll start seeing the added employees, the new negotiated pieces, and those things. Interest. Investments, we ended up 414 last year on investment returns, 45,000 off to the start this year. I looked at last year in July and it was almost exactly the same. We're probably going to be right into that $400,000 range again. Interest rates have started coming back some. Not to the levels of here, but we're starting to make a little progress off zero, so that's nice. Otherwise, that's pretty much all I have tonight. It's pretty quiet in July as far as financials. It really can't really paint a picture too much. And I don't want to scare you with this, just because I mean our stop loss picks up in July. So it resets everybody's stop loss rates. So our claims over the next several months will probably be extremely high. but that's because everybody resets back to zero. Once you hit stop loss throughout the year, $150,000 max per individual, then it starts kind of tapering out some of those high claimants. But we have 2 to 3 claimants every single year that are meeting the stop loss, so we'll start seeing the $150,000 coming on in the early months, and then once they hit the stop loss, we'll start kind of shallowing back out in the claims. So there's a trend to this with it being high. Last year I think we were over 600,000, so even with this being one of our highest in the last 7 months, it's still much lower than it was at this point last year at 643. So could be much worse. Still trending well. Still have $2.7 million. We have a policy in place that kind of talks about what a premium holiday is to be. We're probably not going to meet that, but I think we need to entertain that at some point if the next several months continue to play out and the fund continues to do well. I think the board, I may eventually bring that to the board to see if we want to do a premium holiday in December or January, even though I don't think we're going to meet the procedures and the threshold and what we have in place right now. But I don't think we can keep growing the balance and not give back a little bit from time to time. So I think it's something to look at and something worth exploring in the next couple months.
Do you recall which month we did that a couple years ago? Was it December, January, or was it the end of the school year?
December, January, typically, yeah.
Okay, same time
There was a
frame.
couple years where we did 2 premium holidays. There was 1 year where we did none. There was 1 year where we did 1.
Okay.
So,
We did that at the end of the year. Was that to help out on the taxes? It didn't hit our employees on the taxes as far as the premiums, or was there a reason why we did it in January and December?
just to try to help out around the holidays, Christmas time, that type of thing.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Then we'll get more into the capital spending plan with the committee going forward. Any other questions on any of the financial reports tonight?
No.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. All right, and then we're going to move on to our superintendent's report this evening.
Thank you. I'm excited for the work that the administrative team has put in this summer to be ready for our buildings to welcome back our staff and students. We are very excited to welcome back all staff tomorrow. We have a full staff convocation tomorrow morning where we will spend some time reflecting on the question, what is your why? I want our staff to reflect and remember what brought them to the field of education. There's been so much out of our control over the last few years, and I want to take some time to refocus on the reasons we're here, to empower all students for success. Tomorrow morning, we'll also kick off our leadership and equity training. All staff will participate in equity training throughout the year that will consist of 8 themes, including purposeful building culture, accountability and feedback, positive mindset management, defeating biases, character strengths, emotional IQ and resiliency, effective communication, and relationships and trust. Later on this evening, we are asking you to approve a contract with Jack Slavinsky, who will be presenting and helping us through the leadership and equity training. Our students will be starting on a staggered start, and our first group of students will be starting on Monday, August 22nd. A quick update on the high school field project. We do have the turf field is completed, and both the home and the visitor sides of the stands are ADA compliant, so that is finished. The press box and the track should be finished by Friday, and our next home game is scheduled for Saturday. So we're hopeful that we can get all the work done. If you haven't had a chance to stop out and see it, it actually looks pretty great. They did a great job on it. I know there was some hiccups, perhaps, but we're almost at the end line. So thanks to Pat for seeing that through, and Mike Britch working with them, with the crew to finish that. And lastly, this fall we will also be working on handicap access to the baseball and the softball fields. So not only paths to get to those fields, but also seating that would be ADA compliant. That will start after Labor Day. We did hold off on starting that until after the Brock Strong games. They do use our facilities over Labor Day weekend, and that is expected to be completed November 1st. And that is all I have for you.
Thank you very
This
much,
evening.
Mrs. Hunt.
Thank you.
All right. All right, and then we're going to move on to our district reports.
I'm sorry, I do
Oh,
have a
I'm
question
sorry,
for
go
Ms.
ahead. I'm
Hunt.
sorry.
I'd like to know, I understand that in regards to the open enrollment, thank you for providing those numbers. I understand that we use 77 seats of the available 100 seats. So
Yep.
can you explain why those 23 seats weren't filled? Did it have to do with the building capacity issue? And
Yes.
not having the space?
Yes, it's definitely building capacity. So what we would do is look at each grade level and see where the student numbers are. And at certain numbers, there's just no way we can add students. The one other piece that did come into play, so that's really K-8. There was really little question on whether we could accept students in those grades. And then we also looked at the high school. We had a lot of discussion about the behaviors and some of the situations that we experienced last year. And there was a lot of conversation around, is it best for us to see where we're at this year before approving more students? Being able to focus on really trying to get the behaviors under control, starting off on positive. And so we, at that level, also decided not to accept any high school students. In addition to those, we always accept staff students. That's our first set. We then move on to those students who have already been with us under open enrollment, so they would continue on. For the most part, we do also, though, before approving those, we have to look at the grade levels numbers as well. So it's not guaranteed that if you were here on open enrollment last year, you automatically be accepted the following year. And then we look at any students that have moved out of the district that were here prior as well. And then we go to new enrollment.
Yeah, so I noticed the new enrollment numbers were very, very small.
Yes.
So in the future, I hope that we can expand that
Yes.
and welcome more families into the district.
Yeah. That's something that I think for the last few years, the new numbers have been fairly low. On being, COVID as well didn't help that. But even prior to that, just the size of our numbers, it's tough to, at the high school is where, if we're gonna get to that 100, it would happen at the high school. It's very rare for it to happen at the elementary, middle school levels.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for asking that, by the way.
Before we move on, anybody have any other questions for Superintendent Hunt? Okay, if not, we are going to move on to district reports. So I'm going to need a motion on the district reports this evening.
So moved.
Okay. And I'll second that one. Okay. All right.
We don't need a motion second on that.
Is there any we don't have any questions on the district reports? All right.
I'm sorry.
Yep, go
I
ahead.
have another question.
Yes, ma'am.
I understand that Mr. Whitlatch will be providing the state testing and report card information in September. How exactly will we get that information? Will it be provided during a board update?
So Mr. Whitlatch is actually on leave,
Okay.
and we're hoping he'll be back mid-September, but if not, definitely by October. We will do a presentation at a board meeting with that overview for you.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so with that, I'm just wondering, with map testing coming up, are we or our teaching staff and administrators planning on doing anything different this year in order to help students be better prepared for the test?
Actually, I am going to put Mr. Lolithan on the spot because he is actually looking at some of the data they got last year in relation to state testing and what they saw growth on. They've actually made a change in practice.
Good evening, yes. So one of the things that I definitely want to highlight is we have reviewed some of the data that has been released thus far. OALPA data, so students that receive EL services. We showed some great growth for the students in that department. So that is one thing I really want to highlight that we've done a great job with. And that is something that has grown in our district. And so we're really meeting the needs of those kids and where they are at this time. But we're continuing to focus on that and help them grow as well. And some of the other identifications, we actually just are reviewing some of our third grade results from the spring test as they correlate not only with our map testing that is taken 3 times throughout the year, but also the fall test from last year. We're seeing we actually talked about a little bit earlier, we're seeing where a lot of kids are showing growth. They may not have met the proficiency mark of 700, but they're still showing a lot of academic gains. And we feel as though we are making great progress due to the gaps that we saw because of COVID. So we are meeting the students where they are, and we're helping them grow as best we can. We are going to be looking at some of our value-added data that we'll receive in October. And we're going to do a deep data dive at the October 13th PD and really highlight some of those gaps, not only that we saw growth in, but also some of the areas where we might be lacking, so we can better the instruction to meet those students.
Okay, so I assume that those students might be convened in small groups or maybe one-on-one or
Yes, so
that kind of?
at Winchester Trail specifically, we will test on the 4th day of school and then the following Tuesday for reading and math. And what we do is we identify the groups that might not be there yet, and they will receive the response to intervention, the RTI services, in either reading and math to help with that gap closure so they can show more results and better results for the winter and the spring tests.
Okay, great.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you.
No, thank you.
Did any of our other principals want to share?
All right. Are there any other questions on the district's report this evening?
I'd say before we move on, I just want to give, Pat, hey, I was at Friday Night Lights, and I know you were getting hit up by every booster member organization and maybe a board member or two. But I mean, it was exciting to show up to Friday Night Lights soccer game and see, I mean, the bleachers, Matt, you were there. I mean, the bleachers were as full as, I wouldn't say a big football Friday night, but they were pretty full, more full than I've ever seen for a soccer game, and it was exciting. I mean, the arena, the kind of the vibe around the game, everybody that I've talked to had nothing but good to say about that. So I'm glad we were able to get the track and field set up, and
Believe me too.
yeah, I know. But it was a great event. I hope we can do that again in the future, to some degree.
Thank you, sir. And they had the band out there,
Yeah.
really brought that energy up. So
Yeah,
yeah,
it did for sure.
completed the whole experience. So
Thank you. Perfect. All right. Does anyone have any other additional questions or comments on the district reports before we move on? Okay, if no, we're gonna move on to the consent agenda, and I am gonna need a motion on the consent agenda this evening.
So moved.
And I will second that. All right,
I think we're thrown off with the new setup.
yeah.
We'll start with number 1, the minutes. We are asking you to approve the minutes from the July 18th regular meeting and the July 28th special meeting. Number 2 is certified personnel. We're asking you to approve the employment contract for Michelle LaRoe. She was our last hire of the 22-23 school year, intervention specialist at the middle school. Number 3, we have several resignations for classified personnel. And then you will see that we are asking you to approve the employment of 2 individuals. And then a couple of those bus drivers that have resigned do want to come back and substitute for us. So we're approving them as subs. Number 4, our supplemental personnel. We're asking you to approve the assistant high school marching band supplemental, as well as assistant high school cross-country coach. And number 5, we're asking you to approve the supplemental salary schedule. We added the high school lacrosse and assistant high school lacrosse coaches to the salary schedule. If you recall, over summer, we approved lacrosse as a high school sport, so we needed to add those individuals to the salary schedule.
Thank you.
as far as hiring certified personnel, I mean, everything I'm reading online are all the districts that are extremely struggling trying to find folks to fill positions, and I think you and this team have done a great job keeping a full roster and not being in the desperate situation of hiring somebody just to fill it where we're hiring quality folks. So
Yeah, we definitely got
kudos to
lucky.
you and the team to retain good people and find new people, and to keep those numbers as close as we can to filled. So thank you.
Thank you. Kudos goes out to the team. They work hard to interview, and I know several of our buildings spent a lot of time this summer interviewing. We actually just had new staff orientation on Monday. we brought in just under 60 new staff. And that would be from bus drivers to our teaching staff, parapros, but just under 60. So that is large. We are hopeful that that will be our largest class and we can move forward and, keeping those here and having much smaller additions in the future.
What do you get them through Nick's team payroll and Stacy and everybody? I mean, that's a lot of onboarding, so thank you.
High cost.
Thank you.
So I think we're going to explore different alternatives over the next several months on how can we retain, what can we put in place, incentives. So I think we've got some work to do as a district to try to come up with some ways to keep people in the district.
Okay.
Good.
Good.
Okay. Are there any other questions on the consent agenda this evening? Okay, if not, Mr. Roberts?
Ms. Talley?
Yes.
Mr. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. George?
Yes.
Mr. Krueger?
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0. And we're going to move on to action items. So the first action item is going to be a resolution to apply to the Classrooms Facility Assistance Program, or is it CFAP,
CFAP, yep.
with the OFCC. So I'm going to need a motion on action item number 1.
Move.
Second.
Mr. Roberts?
So this action item is simply just getting back in line with OFCC to try to get back into the CFAP program. All that really is a co-funding mechanism. Right now ours is 69%. The state would pick up 31% of any addition or new build. Right now we're not in line with them to be able to be co-funded. So this is a resolution to put us back in line of when money's available, that the co-funding would be available at that point once funding is available. They're telling me that it's probably at least 4 years before we would be even considered. That's why we wanted to go ahead and get on the list at this point, because we know possibly a 2-grade level building is in the future. So to get on the list now and to plan for that. So 4 to 7 years would be probably our window for that. And hopefully OFCC would have co-funding and the state would pick up 31% of that cost.
And then just a quick question. If we did decide to move forward, I know we're probably going to talk about this, but we would get that 31% back even if we had to put some of our own funding up front. This would put us in line to get that money back from the state at some point.
Yeah, and resolution, or the action item number 2
Okay.
is that piece of it.
Okay. All right. Does anyone have any other additional questions on action item number 1? Okay, if not, Mr. Roberts?
Mr. George?
Yes.
Mr. Krueger?
Yes.
Mr. Butler?
Yes.
Ms. Talley?
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0. And we're going to move on to action item number 2, which is going to be the resolution of intent to participate in the expedited local partnership program, or ELP, with the OFCC. So I'm going to need a motion on action item number 2.
So move.
Second.
Mr. Roberts?
So since we can't be in the CFAP program, to where they're co-funding because money's not available, we can participate in this ELP program. It basically says if we do a project, they will give us credit later if the project met their standards and was approved under their watch. So this is essentially saying, all right, this is the application to approve to get back into ELP with OFCC. If they approve it and they run our projections, our enrollment projections, and they say, yes, the additions that we're going to talk about later are approved, then we would pick up our 31% as credit. And then when we did a CFAP program later where it's co-funded, we will get that money back at that time.
Okay. So this just kind of gives us, we're just putting ourselves in line and,
We're earning credit.
okay.
We're paying 100% of the cost, and then we're going to earn the 31% back later when funding is available.
Okay, perfect. All right. So does anyone have any other additional questions about action item number 2?
Do we currently have any funding in the ELP program?
They're telling me that we used it all on the high school project.
Okay. Okay.
Have we audited that?
They have not closed the books yet.
Okay.
OFCC is not. We're trying to push them to get it closed because they're tying up almost $800,000 of our local money that we would like to move into permanent improvement.
Okay.
That's how we were gonna pay for the turf and those type of things. Since we had already moved that money to the side for the high school location, we were just gonna use that money for the turf. I mean, obviously, we're paying for the turf now, but it was an easy way to say, let's get it done, because we had that money sitting there to the side.
Some of that was interest and other stuff that we
Yeah,
gained on
interest
that
earned,
project.
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
7.5, some of it was 7.5, some of it was remaining from the $7.5 million the board transferred in 2017, and some of it was interest earned on that money while it sit there during the project.
Awesome. All right, does anyone have any other additional questions about action item number 2? Okay, if not, Mr. Roberts?
Mr. George?
Yes.
Mr. Krueger?
Yes.
Mr. Butler?
Yes.
Ms. Talley?
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0. And we're gonna move on to action item number 3, and this is gonna be a motion to approve an agreement with John, and I'm gonna try to Slavinsky, thank you, Mrs. Hunt, LLC, to provide equality and leadership training during the 2022-2023 school year for the amount of $35,000. So I'm gonna need a motion on action item number 3,
So moved.
and I will second that. Okay. All right,
Thank
Mrs.
you.
Hunt? Yeah.
As I mentioned in my report earlier, Jack Slavinsky will be taking us through the leadership and equity training. This past spring, the administrative team and our diversity and inclusion committee for equity went through the training. We spent a lot of time over the summer, feedback, preparing, planning for the rollout to all staff this school year. His first session, he'll actually be at our convocation tomorrow, and then he starts training this week with our staff, and it will go through the year, and we will be finished end of April. I want to say our last date is April 18th, but right around the end of April. So at that point in time, we will have all been through the training, which, we've talked. It's definitely important for us, our staff, our students, to be able to come into our schools, feel safe, feel supported, and that everybody feels that they matter. And that's really the focus of this training.
I know we started out with the town hall a couple years ago. We've been moving forward with the DICE committee, so I know this sounds like it's just another step in the right direction, so.
Absolutely. It's long overdue, in my opinion. This is something that, we are ready to tackle. We're ready to start having the courageous conversations and ready to make a difference.
Wonderful.
So you said that it's going to be ongoing training.
Correct.
Approximately how many training sessions will each staff member get? Is it quarterly or?
So every session is broken down into an hour. Nick might pull it up for us. But so 8 hours of training that would be with Jack. But the work is not with Jack. The work comes with us and our administrative team. So these are the dates that he will be with us at the different locations. When I said all staff, we mean all staff, education center staff, our operations staff, our custodians, our parapros. And so the sessions are with Jack, and then we as administrators and our diversity team will work with our buildings to ensure that we're
Put that in practice?
putting into practice. Absolutely. The program's great, but it won't work if it's the Jack show. And we've talked about that. So we met last week, the administrative team, and we made the commitment that we're all in, that this is something that we have to make sure that we bring to our building and we put in the time, because if we don't, it's not going to be successful, and that just can't happen. One of the things that our administrative team talked about last week is just finding the time to ensure that we can do the work. So they're working in their buildings. That is something that when the calendar does come to you for next year, you may see some small differences in the calendar committee that would be able to provide us with opportunities so that it's not just a one-year thing, that we continue those conversations moving forward.
I think that's awesome.
Thank you.
So it looked like he was doing it. I just did a count from back here with my bad eyes, but it looked like 20 some odd sessions throughout the year. Is he available outside of those sessions if there are specific questions that come up from groups? And then I'm guessing, but maybe verify, in between sessions, then it's a matter of the leaders in each individual school then to kind of roll out and, I guess, provide some quality assurance
Yes, in conjunction with
Okay.
Jack. So we've been planning, so when we went through it in the spring, the reason we did that is so that we could get feedback on our thoughts on the training.
Okay.
So there has been some feedback that we were able to give him so that we can make changes moving into this year with our staff and what we felt would go over really well or what we felt we might need to present in a different way.
Okay.
So those conversations after the sessions will continue. He wants feedback as much as we want to give it. And so the relationship is still there. In addition to if there's other sessions outside of what the scope of work is currently, that would be something that we may have to pay more for. But he is absolutely willing to work with us and be a part of the rollout and the planning.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, and what I did like, Kaya, because you spoke to me about this a little bit, is that really every student on their journey is to be treated the same. And I think that's kind of what you said. There's no exclusion. It's every student, on their way is going to get treated the same here in Canal. And so I thought that was real important, so.
Yeah, it's, I can't give away my speech for tomorrow's convocation because it's exciting and, but I speak on that and I share a little bit of my personal relationships that I've built with students and staff who would probably tell you that I'm amazing and I'm awesome. But on the flip side, there's also those ones that I didn't get video of but they probably would say I didn't connect with them. And so no matter how much we feel like we're connecting with our students or our staff or our families, are we, if we're not connecting with them all? And so that's the message. And at the end, that's what we want, is that our students can say, I made a connection with that staff member because they called me by name, because they knew about me outside of the classroom, because they cared to listen. And so that's our focus. When you talk equity, it's not just black and white. It's about every student and every difference and every similarity. It doesn't matter. When they come into our classrooms, they should be supported.
Feel like they belong.
Feel like they belong.
Exactly.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, I really liked it, and it ties really well with our mission statement, which is right behind us, empowering all students for success. So it really empowers our staff along with our students to be able to do that. So I'm excited about it. I know this is a commitment that you've made. Obviously, you've been here for a while, so I know you're committed to it. I've had conversations with Mr. Roberts, and I know he feels the same way. So I'm excited that we're moving forward in a good, positive direction. So, yep.
We are too. Thank you.
Absolutely. So does anyone have any other questions on action item number 3? Okay, if not, Mr. Roberts?
Ms. Talley?
Yes.
Mr. Barnes? Or shoot, I wrote Mr. Butler. I'm sorry.
Yes.
I wrote Barnes. Mr. George?
Yes.
Mr. Kruger?
Yes.
That's a day. And then
Motion passes 4-0.
Mr.
Alright.
Barnes. Sorry about that.
Don't,
Mr. Butler.
hey, don't worry about it. We all have our hiccups. All right, now we're going to move on to action item number 4, which is our bus stop resolution. So I'm going to need a motion on action item number 4.
So move.
Okay?
Second.
Second. All right.
All right, and this is something we do every year, annual. We're just asking you to approve the resolution for the 22-23 school bus stops.
Perfect. All right, does anyone have any other additional questions on action item number 4?
Are these the same stops that we used last year?
There are some changes.
I see a
Yeah.
head shake back there.
Yeah, it changes every year depending on the students where they're at. They just try to make the most efficient use of the trips. So we did have a little bit of a hiccup in our system. So the bus times will be correct tomorrow morning, correct? So if parents are listening, there was just a hiccup that we had, and so we updated it. It updates overnight, so look tomorrow, and those are the correct updated bus times.
So I assume the families that are impacted by the change will be notified?
Yes, and we sent it out an email letting them know
Okay.
as well.
Okay.
Does anyone have any other additional questions on action item number 4?
Did we post that? I got that email. Did we post that on like our Facebook page?
I'm seeing a no.
Okay.
No, we just emailed families.
Okay.
Okay.
It might not be a bad idea to consider that in the future. If we have a change like that, just post it on the school Facebook site. Because I know I posted it into a couple of the community pages and got no comments, just got people actively, clicked that they had seen it, so. Just as many ways to communicate, especially something like that, because if somebody's looked at it and have the wrong schedule and don't look at it again, then their kids are gonna be waiting on the bus when it's not gonna be there.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any other additional questions on action item number 4? If not, Mr. Roberts?
Mr. Krueger?
Yes.
Ms. Talley?
Yes.
Mr. Beller?
Yes.
Mr. George?
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0. And we're going to move on to action item number 5, which is going to be the resolution to advertise for purchasing of buses. So I'm going to need a motion on action item number 5. And I will make that motion.
Second.
Sorry. This one's for Mr. Roberts, I would imagine.
Yeah, so we do this every year. We go with through Meta, so we don't. This is state law. We have to bid the buses, so we do it through their cooperative. We have 4 buses on here. It doesn't mean we have to buy 4 buses. We just like to prepare in case we do need to do that. But this covers us on the bidding process for when we go to buy buses. Probably soon, I would think.
Let's say, are we scheduled to purchase?
Yeah, we're scheduled to purchase 2 buses.
Okay.
We may purchase more if we get the bus grant. The last 2 years we have received the
right.
state bus grant. So if we receive that again, we will probably act to move to buy 1 or 2 more based on the funding from that.
And I know we started this process. I remember when I first got on the board, it was like my son was going to kindergarten and all the buses had failed the inspection. We were scrambling. And then at that point, we decided to be proactive. And it seems like it's been a long-term project. So just out of curiosity, how long do you think we're going to, is this going to be an ongoing process? Or you foresee us doing this for the next 4 or 5 years? Do you have any?
As long as I'm the treasurer, could be at least 2 buses a year. I don't think you can keep up with the bus fleet. I mean, we have done a nice job of lowering the average age of our buses, but we still have 4 to 6 buses, I think, that's over 15 years old. So as those roll off and we add new ones, we've got buses in the 12-year bracket that's going to be 16 years. So I think as long as we keep up with it, 2 to 3 buses a year, I think we can sustain. The moment we stop doing that, we just lost everything we worked for. So to be able to invest $200,000 per year into busing, I think is a long-term thing where you don't have to borrow money like we did with 2 bus leases and pay the interest on that. So I think as long as we're proactive and we keep doing it, I think we've added, it's been over 20 buses in the last 6 years. And we have 48 or so on the total bus fleet, around about. So I think our average bus is like 8 years old right now.
And those grants help out with that too. They help
Grants
purchase.
have helped. We've added 4, I think, over the last 2 years due to the grant.
Well, that's good. Well, thank you, Mr. Roberts. Does anyone have any other additional questions on action item number 5? Okay, if not, Mr. Roberts?
Mr. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Krueger?
Yes.
Mr. George?
Yes.
Ms. Talley?
Yes.
Okay, motion passes 4-0. And then we're gonna move on to our discussion items, and we have the building plans on here for our discussion plan. I'm sorry, for our discussion items.
I'll jump in.
So, we've been talking over the last couple months of doing, in addition to either the middle school or Indian Trail or adding to the food service. So we've talked about a bunch of different options, but I think what we've landed on is we have to do something at the middle school with the cafeteria space. I don't know how many lunch sessions we're going to have this year, but I think last year we had 8. Are you going to have 8 or 9? So when is lunch starting? 9:30 range still? Okay. So we have kids that are going to be starting breakfast or lunch at 9:30 in the morning because we do not have the space to house that many students. So what we're proposing is 2,500 square feet. That would pick up about 300 kids in the cafeteria. And I think if we switch out the current furniture in there from a round table setup to a rectangular setup, we'll be able to even add a few more. So I think it's a need for our district to cut that lunch sessions down at the middle school. That 2,500 square feet is going to cost us approximately $1.3 million. But I think it's a good addition right now. And the 2,500 square feet isn't so large to where if we add a 2 grade level building later to where that's going to be wasted space. So it's big enough to fix our current problem, but it's not so big to where you're going to have a ton of space later when we have maybe 2 grade levels in this building, which is one of the main reasons we kind of scrapped the addition project that was initially proposed on the back piece of the building. It was going to be an 8 classroom, 4 stack right here. I think if our long-term plan is to build a 2 grade level building, to add that and then remove 1 grade level from that, I think we'd have an extremely oversized building at that point. Now, if our plan's not to build a 2 grade level building later, I think we need to revisit that piece of it later to help on the classroom space. But for now, I think the cafeteria is an immediate need, and then
So does that expand right out to the sidewalk? So,
close. We don't have to tear up the sidewalk
Right.
or anything, but yeah, it expands out to where we'll still have a little bit of grass area in
so
between.
that's where all the drop off in the morning kids walk in. So they just extend, will there just be an exit door straight out from where the existing door is?
I'm assuming, yeah, they'll do
Okay.
something pretty similar.
Okay.
We'll get into the drawings more
Yeah.
and get more people involved on how it's set up, but yeah, I would imagine it will be something very similar.
Along those lines? Okay.
Yeah, so, any questions on the expansion of the cafeteria or any thoughts from the board?
So obviously, we're building the outside walls. Once those are up during probably school sessions in the summer, we would tear down the inside walls to then create that space, right? That's the projection.
Maybe over winter break.
Oh,
They're telling us that if everything
this winter break?
was smooth, no, next winter break, so.
Next winter break, okay.
Yeah, so we'd probably break ground somewhere in the spring,
I was gonna say, geez.
and get the walls up, and maybe it could be before then. That's probably the worst case scenario on this. I mean,
Okay.
The architect and Mike Dingledine that works with him is telling us this is a simple addition. I don't think there's ever a simple addition, but to them, it's a simple addition. So it'd be similar to the media center, I think, at the high school, where they built the outer shell, built it, and then tore down the inner wall, and then just brought the flooring straight through, and then they were done. So I think they could, if materials were in, I think they could probably get it in close to the beginning of school, but they don't want to commit to that timeline.
Okay.
Everything would have to go perfectly for that to happen.
And then on that timeline, what would, as a board, when would you, I know we're having discussions now, what's the time frame you would need us to actually make a motion and have something so we can move forward, obviously, and move past the discussion piece? Like,
We'd need to move in the next month or so, month or two. Maybe we'd look to bring it to you next month
Okay.
on. We've already got the RFQ in the works. It's already ready. If the board says, hey, let's look to move forward with an architect, we can make that happen this week. That way we can start the planning phases, because the planning and the development of it takes several months to get everything you need. We want to go ahead and get the engineers lined up. We want to get the steel beams ordered, because those have there's certain things that have like a 10-month lead time. So the sooner we can make the decision, the sooner we can go, the sooner we can get some of those things on order and ready for the project.
well, I know when we went
Good.
over there as a board, I'm sorry, Dave.
No, go ahead. I apologize.
Oh, no, you're fine. I know that was 5 years ago, but this was before the pandemic, and it was tight in that space 5 years ago. So I can only imagine now with our enrollment, and especially as we get more kids coming back into the district, I can only imagine how tight it is in there now. So You say 9:30, Mr. Moore, you guys are starting that early, eating brunch. Okay, well, brunch, breakfast, lunch. But I think it would be important to have, our kids have the ability to have a consistent schedule. And I think, you know, for my son, I know he's gonna do well next year, and if he eats at 9:30, he'll be fine, but I do think that's a little early. And I think that kind of obviously would interfere with some of the academic things you're able to do in the building, so.
And for those students that are subjected to very early lunch schedules, I'm assuming they're permitted to bring snacks, like eat snacks in their classroom in the afternoon. Is that right?
Correct.
I always set my kid with M&Ms just to make it great in the afternoon for his
A
teachers.
good sugar. Yeah, absolutely.
You're welcome, guys.
Yeah. But yes, they can,
When does, Eric, when does lunch period start at?
at the trails?
Yeah, just to have some context.
If we got our schedule's new
Yeah.
this year, so
Yeah.
top of my head, noon,
Okay, Max,
10:30.
10:30, high school?
Ours is about 10:30 and we have 3 lunches.
Okay. Okay. So just to give some time, context on when some of the other buildings start lunch.
And you're ending lunch. What's your latest lunch, Mr. Moore?
Our latest lunch is 11:16 to 12:04.
Okay. And they're out of school at
They're out of school at 1:30.
1:35. So they're eating.
All day, pretty
Yeah.
much.
Yeah, it's.
They're
all-
eating all day.
There's lunch periods all day long,
Yeah.
pretty much. First couple.
So, Mr. Roberts, I mean, if we have an RFQ ready, an RFQ doesn't obligate us to purchase, right? We have language in our RFQ that says
Correct.
we may not move forward with any of these.
Correct.
So I don't see any reason why, if we have an RFQ ready, I don't see any reason why we would hold that. I mean, once the capital committee gets going here relatively quickly, even if at that point we decide, hey, we don't want to go in this direction at all, and bring that to the board and the board agrees with the reasoning, I mean, then we just say, okay, we're not going to move forward with this RFQ and the responses that we received. I don't see any reason, personally don't see any reason to wait on getting that out.
Okay. I wanted to get buy-in from the board tonight, or we wanted to get buy-in from the
Yeah,
board tonight.
I mean, as long as it
Wanna
doesn't obligate us.
Move forward with
yeah,
something.
as long as it doesn't obligate us to move forward, I don't see any reason to hold that.
Yeah, this is definitely a priority that I would like for it to be expedited as much as we can.
I agree. And we're not touching any cooking space. That's sufficient, correct?
Yeah, no, the cooking space is large enough.
Okay.
So we're good there. Then the other phase, this is what a kindergarten edition would look like at
Which building is this?
Indian Trail.
Okay.
Our current kindergarten wing is on the left wing, the left front wing. You don't want to come all the way down here because of HVAC issues, so the wing would come off like a T on the back. And so it'd be a 6 classroom addition to be able to have full day kindergarten. That would be about $3.9 million, so about 5.2 for both projects. And our plan was to run those together so you could get cheaper prices, and it makes the project slightly bigger to where more people want to bid on the projects.
I know we've talked about this one before, but I know for our families in the district, I feel like full-day kindergarten, I feel like that's an investment in our students, and obviously that's a long-term investment, so I can only see it as a benefit. And then for some of our students we see coming in first grade, I know one of the reasons some of our parents keep them out is because we only can offer half a day. So I think it benefits getting our students in the building, and obviously that early education, that's, you know, all the studies saying that that's the most effective use of that money, is like you hitting them before that 3rd grade, making sure they can read, making sure they have those fundamentals. So I feel like a full-day kindergarten would be a good investment for our district, and that's.
So if we participate in ELP or get involved in ELP out of these 2 projects, we'd get about 1.6 million in credit back?
31%.
Right, okay, so that would be for future construction.
Future construction. This number shows you how much our first grade increases. So on average, kindergarten to first grade increases an average of 40 students. And that's with COVID year of 16 being very low. So if you exclude that one, you're averaging closer to 55 students that come back into our system in first grade that did not go to kindergarten here. Now, we can do a survey to see if the reasoning is half day versus full day, but I'd say that's probably the main reason on why we're picking up the 40 students coming back to first grade when they didn't attend here. Maybe it's a different reason, but it'd be interesting to see. In my last district I worked, it was the same situation. It was about 60 kids that came back. They implemented full-day kindergarten. They lost that. They didn't have that big increase from K to 1. If it works the same in this district, I don't know. I mean, we'd have to maybe get a filler, but I think providing the full-day kindergarten would be a benefit to the community.
The other piece, just to mention, is the financial piece of gaining the full student amount that we get for the full day. And we were looking and talking through that covering the cost of the additional staff we would need to have full-day kindergarten. So yes, there would be a cost to the building, but the staffing could potentially be a break even.
Yep, cost neutral, if not a little bit more with the state funding.
So this would be a one-story. We're not going two-story.
That's what's proposed here. We thought, the architect thought it'd be better to have all kindergarten on level 1, where they're currently located now.
Because again, to overbuild at this,
Again, to overbuild at this location, you run into the same thing. You're going to eventually lose one grade level, so you don't want to build it too big. But at that point, you would probably join up preschool in this building or something along those lines. So you'd open up space to be able to maybe get your systems, academic systems better in place. Ms. Hunt can talk more about that, but from a dollar standpoint and a square footage standpoint, $5.2 million is not pretty good. We get a lot for the amount of money that we're going to spend. We fix a need, and we fix somewhat of a need with getting full-day kindergarten.
so are we anticipating maybe 60 kids? I mean, I know we have no idea, but if you take your 40 to 50 or so, add some more on top of it, you're looking at 60-ish,
I think you'd see
70
that.
kids
Yeah, I think
for
it's
full day?
very, very reasonable to.
Net new kids.
I mean, it's very reasonable to have a very similar. So if you have 280 in first grade last year and you only had 232, it's very reasonable to see kindergarten be more in line with these.
Okay.
And then, I know Mrs. Hunt mentioned the funding piece, but it was my understanding that we're not just picking up the funding for these, if you're talking about 40 or 50 kids. If we have full-day kindergarten, we're also picking up funding for those students that we actually are having in the classroom now.
Correct. Because we're only being funded for half of the 232.
So we additionally, on top of picking up those students that we might be losing that are not coming to us for kindergarten, we're picking up that funding, and we pick up almost, not double, but we pick up a significant amount of funding for the kids who are currently in our building now, which they're coming to us every day anyway. So it seems like financially it would benefit us. And I think as a district, I feel like kindergartens, that's an impactful grade. I feel like that's an investment for our families and our community. I think the community would benefit from having full day.
Yeah, from a financial standpoint, treasurer's always seeking that window to go full day from half day.
Okay.
And the window wasn't 2 years ago when DeWine basically froze the formula and had a fixed funding. At that point, it wouldn't have helped us at all. We could have went full day and it wouldn't have given the district any more money in funding. Now is the window to attack if we wanted to do it, because we're under a funding formula that funds each student. As long as that funding formula is in place, which I don't see it going away, but they could do anything coming in April. But as long as DeWine is still the governor, I don't think he would want to switch and revamp what they had worked so hard on for the last couple of years.
So to bring this up so we're not in the same situation as middle school, Mr. Riddle, I mean, if we're putting 60 kids, 70 kids, the infrastructure at Indian Trail, I mean, for cafeteria and gym space, I mean, is that going to burden anything over there if you're adding that many kindergartners?
No, we would just have to add more lunch periods.
Okay.
That would be the only thing I can see where that is. Nick, is that going out to the playground?
What's that?
Is that heading out to the playground?
Yes. Yeah, and the architect did look at what the strain would do to the cafeteria and the gym and cafeteria square footage meets the student population, that's
Okay.
in there still.
Because I don't want to create another problem
Yeah.
where we got to add more cafeteria space without thinking about it. And as far as busing happens, I mean, now we've got, does this help with busing
Actually
or
help
hurt
busing,
it?
help
Because
busing.
we're not making
Because
double
you don't have
trips at
You
that.
don't have the
trips.
midday trips. Preschool you would, but that's a smaller number.
Okay.
Yeah, it actually solves a bus issue along the way too. Good point.
And is this the same RFQ or is this different from the other one, what Dave
It's
was
the same.
talking about? It's the
It's
same
done
one?
the same, yeah,
Okay.
we put them both in to be able to scope it out.
And one piece, just to clarify for those listening and this would not be something we would take out to voters, this specific piece. This would be something that would be funded with our general fund dollars.
That's a good point, because I know sometimes when people see that, so this is something, knock on wood, potentially we'll have the ability to pay for ourselves, so we
Correct.
won't have to go out and ask for any additional tax dollars.
So much like all the expansion and upgrades we did to the high school came from general funds. We didn't ask anyone for any additional monies. Same situation here. I mean, we have the monies we've wisely spent over the last year, so we have monies available to do this without going to ask additional. Even an operating, we don't need that, right? We have that covered.
Operating would be fine. We'd have to add kindergarten teachers, but the additional state funding would offset
Would
that.
offset that, okay.
Good. Okay.
And staff is on board conversation-wise?
Yeah,
Or we're gonna get there at some point, or?
Yeah, I mean, we've definitely shared with the administrative team and they're on board.
Okay.
Middle school, obviously it's a need, and the all-day kindergarten is something that it's exciting to be able to provide. The early childhood for full day just gives us more access and gives students, more access to instructional and the social emotional learning, like learning to play and all the things that they learn in kindergarten.
Just wanna make sure we got everybody's buy-in and we're,
Yep.
gaining input and moving forward with big structures like this, so.
Absolutely.
Is there anything else you're gonna need from us this evening, Mr. Roberts? I know you talked about making sure you had buy-in from the board, so I know we're just having discussions now, but is there anything else moving forward, or?
No, we'll get the RFQ out, and start at least looking at what we need to do next steps. Running it through capital projects committee. Moving forward.
Well, thank you, guys. And then, that's it for the discussion. We're gonna move on to executive session. So we are gonna have a need to enter into executive session, and we're gonna enter executive session, a motion to enter an executive session to consider the specialized detail of security arrangements. And I'm gonna need a motion.
So move.
And I'll-
Second.
Okay, I got Dave, and second from Mrs. Talley. Okay, I have a motion and I have a second, and Mr. Roberts?
Mr. George,
Yes.
Ms. Talley,
Yes.
Mr. Butler,
Yes.
Mr. Krueger.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes 4-0, and we're gonna enter executive session. I'm gonna give everybody a chance to take a bathroom break. We're gonna go into executive session, we'll say at 8:10. And then, are we gonna meet Mr. Roberts, or we wanna go, we stay here, what are we doing?
We'll go over there. Well, unless
Question for you.
we,
Yes, sir.
if somebody stays, we can go over there.